Alright, so go and open up Flash Basics 6, Body Mechanics. Okay, so this is the last Flash Basics class. The next section deals with human body mechanics. So this session is an introduction to some basic body mechanics. So far we've learned most of the animation principles, but in this section we'll cover the principle of arcs and some principles that are not in the original list of principles, but are extremely important in animation. In our animation today we're going to incorporate some overshoot and some drag. So don't forget our workflow. As we always begin our animation, we will start by blocking in our key poses and general timing, and then we'll check it and refine our work, and repeat if necessary. So just like in the last few sessions, we have our camera view, which we don't touch, and we have our shot comp. So we'll go into the shot comp by selecting you can select the first key on frame 1, and either select the pivot point, or you can just select the arm because it's inside the shot comp. So we need to get into the shot comp. So double click on that. Now we're inside. So you can see we have this mannequin arm, and we have an upper arm piece, we have a lower arm, forearm, and we have a hand. So we're going to get this arm to swing back and forth as if it was in a walk cycle. We're going to break the joints. We're going to learn how to follow through and drag the hand as it goes through its motion. We'll cycle an arm swing, and then we'll hold it, and then we'll anticipate and point. Here, I'll show you a finished one. This is what we're going to shoot for. Okay, we're also going to learn how to swap symbols in the hand. So let's change artwork like that. Okay, we'll just close that up. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is let's bring all of our timelines up to 100. So let's just go to our top layer at frame 100 and just go right down to the third layer. You can drag those, right click, and go insert frame. We'll have to do this on scene 1 as well. You want to get your camera view, shot comp and camera view, and insert frame. So we go all the way up to 100, and we'll go back inside the shot comp by double clicking, and we're all the way up to 100 here as well. Alright, so let's begin with our workflow of blocking in our timing and posing. So let's set our first pose. Let's get the arm to start in a forward position. Select all three parts, all three symbols, and press Q on your keyboard. Now in Flash there's no real way of, as far as I know, there's no real way of grouping these together or linking them together like you can in other animation software. So when you select, for example, if you select the forearm, I already have the pivot point at the shoulder. The forearm, the pivot point's at the elbow. On the hand, the pivot point's at the base of the hand. So that's where you want these individual symbols to have their pivot point. But when you select all three, it sort of averages the pivot point. It goes to a place where it's sort of an average between all three. So we're just going to move that pivot point to the shoulder, and we'll swing the arm forward. Now one thing you can do, a little tip, when you have all three selected, you can select each one individually, or you can drag select all. Now if you just want to get the forearm and the arm, you can hold down shift and select the upper arm, and it just deselects it. So now we have the forearm and the hand. Move the pivot point to the elbow, and we can rotate it now this way. And then again, hold shift down, deselect the forearm, and we'll get the hand. So this is our first pose. You can just follow along with me here. Okay, so onto our keyboard, and right next to the M on your keyboard is the greater than less than keys. I'm just going to tap to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So select your top layer, which is your shoulder, and you can hold shift down and select the hand layer, and it'll get all three. Press F6 to set a key, and we're going to set our next pose. So again, just select everything, pivot point at the shoulder, and go to the corner here, and we'll just bring it right down. So in this pose, we're going to drag the hand back a little bit. As the arm starts to swing towards screen right, it's gaining velocity, and the hand is going to drag a little bit to the left. So let's turn on our onion skinning so we can see what we're doing. So there we can see our first and second pose. Let's tap down the timeline 4 more frames. Select a row and F6 to key it. Put the pivot point back to the top, and now we'll set this next key pose. So there's almost a completed swing. So what we're going to do is we're going to slow into this last position. So now we have 1, 2, 3 poses set. Let's go 4 more frames. We're just going to do everything 4 frames apart. And we're just going to move the hand a tiny bit. Whoops. For this 4th pose. We're just going to move it a little bit. This is our slow in. And let's actually get the hand to start coming back. Okay, so for our 5th pose, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's do another 4 down the timeline. Set a key, and now we're going to actually start to overlap this action. So let's get the whole arm going on its way back. So again, it's going to slow out of that last pose. Let's deselect the upper arm, pivot point to the elbow, and we'll start to break this joint and overlap the last pose. So let's actually bring the whole thing down a little. And you can see the last pose that we set underneath. We're going to actually have this pose overlap the last one, especially in the hand. You can see that it's overlapping. Now if we go to the top here, we have onion skinning on, and we have this range slider at the top that shows us our range of drawings we want to see. If we just want to see the last drawing that we did, we can grab this bracket like we've done in the last sessions and just drag it right to your time marker, and you can expand this one so we can see the last drawing. Let's just scrub over this and check and see what we're doing here. So let's just turn our onion skinning off for a moment. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3 poses, an ease in, and then an overlapping pose. Now it's going to head back. We're just going to do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4 down our timeline, set a key, and we're going to have all 3 pieces selected, pivot at the shoulder, and we're going to start heading back. So for this pose, you can actually let's break the elbow just a little bit and have the entire arm, or not the entire arm, have the arm start to drag from the elbow down. So onion skinning back on. Let's check it. I'm always sort of scrubbing and or stepping on the timeline as I'm going, just to check my work. Slow in, overlap. It's heading back now. So 4 more frames down the timeline. F6, set a key. And let's bring the hand right back up, close to where we originally had it. Let's check frame 1. Okay, so it's right near the middle at the crosshairs. Okay, so bring it almost back to where it's supposed to be. We can drag the hand a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do our ease in on this side now. So we'll move it just slightly and have the hand start to come back. And then we're going to do our overlapping pose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next key pose. We'll have the arm, most of the arm or the upper arm start to come back. Deselect the top arm. Let's break the elbow here and overlap. Overlap the last pose. Okay. Actually, this pose and this pose can be exactly the same. Okay, so let's bring our second last drawing up a little bit so it'll match the one at frame 1. And we're going to copy frame 1 to our last pose here. They're almost the same, we just went and animated it rough, but we really want our last pose, which is on frame 33, to match exactly our first key pose at frame 1. So let's select the whole row for frame 1, right click and copy frames, select the last row, right click and paste frames. And as I mentioned before, when you copy and paste frames in Flash for some reason, if it's more than one layer, as soon as you paste, it creates another row of keys. I think it's just moving over what you pasted. So let's just select that and say clear keyframe. So now if we play that, go to frame 1 and just hit enter on your keyboard, we see a nice blocked in arm swing. Okay, so let's tween all this and have a look at it. As we've always done before in the last sessions, let's select any frame in between the 2 key poses. Just select the entire row there, and we'll go classic tween. Okay, and now let's watch it again. We can shut onion skinning off. Okay, that's not too bad. It's nice and smooth, but we want to adjust the timing here. Let's get the middle of the swing a little faster. Sort of like the movement of a pendulum. We want it to ease in and out of on both sides of the swing, but be quicker in the middle. A little note about easing in and out. The movement of the human body and most other objects, it needs time to accelerate and slow down. So for this reason, animation looks more realistic if it has more drawings near the beginning and end of the action and fewer in the middle. Let's take a look at where our arm starts to accelerate. I think this is fine, but between pose 2 and pose 3, we want that to be a little bit quicker. We want to decrease the space here between pose 2 and 3, so giving us less tweens, less in-betweens. So let's grab everything from pose 3 on and just click and drag all that over. So this movement will be faster from pose 2 to pose 3. And then we do want this to continue the way it was at the same speed. And just before it starts to take off back to the middle of the swing, we want this entire movement to be faster. So we'll grab everything from this pose to the end and drag it closer together. And drag these closer together. That way from one end of the swing to the middle, we only have, looks like we have 1, 2 in-betweens for each one of these poses. Actually, we want this action to be quicker too, so let's grab everything from pose 2 to the end. Whoops, and bring it 1 frame closer together and just check it. Actually, to see this better, let's go to the top right corner of our timeline, hit this little icon, and you can see it's checked on normal. Let's check it to medium. This just scales up our timeline a bit so we can see what's going on better. So we can see our first 3 poses are closer together now, and then there's more in-betweens for the end of the swing on the right side, and then on the left side there's more in-between. So really what we've done is just by dragging all those keys closer together, or all those poses closer together, we've sped up the middle of the swing. So let's press enter. I'm feeling like the whole thing's just too mushy and slow, so let's just drag each pose 1 frame closer together. Pose 8 and pose 9. So this is the process of refining our animation. That's a little better. Okay, so what we want to do is let's cycle this. So basically what we're going to do, because pose 1 and our final pose are exactly the same, we want to, if we're going to cycle this, we want to continue this on from pose 2. So our last pose is basically the same exact pose as pose 1. So we're going to grab pose 2 and everything from pose 2 right to the end. Right click and copy frames, and then the distance between pose 1 and pose 2 is, I believe, 2 frames. 1, 2, yep. So we're going to go to the end. So pretending this is frame 1 or pose 1, and 2 down the timeline, select the whole row, right click and say paste frames. And then we got this row at the end that we don't need. It's just clear keyframe, and you can see that the 2 poses between our last pose and the beginning of our cycle hasn't been tweened, so we'll tween that. And now if we watch it, press enter, we have a cycle. This could be smoother, but I'm not going to modify it right now. It can be refined further. Okay, so that's good. So what we want to do now is we want to get this arm swing to settle, and then we're going to hold it for a bit, and then we'll anticipate and do a point. And let's have it stop there and swing back and settle. So we're going to have it settle right about here in this position. So let's take if you're looking up at your timeline, we're going to have it settle in this position. So we're going to delete these last 3 poses. Go to the top layer, you can drag select to the bottom layer, and clear keyframe. And you can also right click and remove tween. There. So now we want this to, because it's coming out of a cycle and it's going to settle, we want that to be slow. So if you play it now, it just stops dead. So we want that to settle, so this action is going to decelerate and settle. So we're going to need a lot more in-betweens, which means we're going to spread these key poses out. The second last pose to the last pose, it's only 1, 2 in-betweens. So let's bring that right out. 3, 4, and then our pose. Alright, so it's slowing down a little bit. Now let's just change this pose a little bit. Let's put it back to a more neutral pose. I'm just going to select the forearm and hand, create transform tool, pivot to the elbow, and let's just bend the elbow a little. I'm going to deselect the forearm and just give the hand a more natural hanging position. Okay, so the arm needs a little drag. It looks a little stiff when it goes to settle. Let's select the row right in the center between these last 2 poses and hit F6. And let's give that arm some drag. So we'll just drag the hand a little bit. Now let's scrub over that. That looks better. Yeah, now it stops pretty fast. So let's take our last pose and drag it out, creating more in-betweens. That's nice and slow. It settles. And we're going to use a flash's ease function for this. We could go down the timeline maybe another 4 or 5 or 6 frames and set another pose to get it to ease in on its own, but I'm just going to actually drag it down the timeline a little bit just to make sure that our last pose has a nice cushion. and deceleration, and we'll use Flash's ease function. So select a row anywhere between the last two poses, and if you go to the properties on the right side, you'll see under tweening, right next to ease, it says 0. Let's just drag that right up to 100, and it'll ease in nice and slow. And that's fine. So let's just zoom into the hand for a moment. I just want to show you something. I'm going to select the whole row again. I'm going to put the ease back to 0. And I'm going to turn in onion skinning on. And you can see that all these poses, this is between our second last pose and our last pose. It's right in between. So you can see that all the poses are an equal distance apart. It's easier to see if we just focus on the fingertips. If we crank the ease up to 100, you can watch the change. Now you can see that consecutively they get closer and closer together, which gives us our slow in cushion effect. Okay, so turn onion skinning back off. I'm going to zoom out. Let's take a look at our arm swing. Feel free and actually definitely go further with this and just keep refining it. Keep adjusting your timing and experiment with the timing up in the timeline. Bring some of your poses closer together and further apart. Of course, you always want to cushion and ease both ends of the swing, and you do want it to be faster in the middle. Okay, now we're going to hold this for a few frames. Let's hold it for 10 frames, which is almost half a second. Press F6 on our keyboard, so this is going to be our hold, where it's not going to move. This is the beginning of the next movement. You can grab this little bar under your timeline and just slide over a little bit, so we have room to animate down the timeline. Okay, so now we're going to anticipate and point. So in this action, we're going to cover anticipation and more drag, overshooting, learn how to swap symbols as well. We'll go down the timeline, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're just going to key these in equal distance apart for now as we're blocking. This is keep it very rough. Free transform tool, pivot to the shoulder, and let's set our anticipation pose. Remember you can deselect the upper arm. Now when we swap symbols, we're going to be changing the hand shape. We're not going to do it just yet. We're going to do that at the end. So for now, let's just get the main action going. This is going to be our anticipation. Now assuming this arm is attached to a body, if he's going to anticipate a point, he's probably going to move his body back a little bit, so we'll just move the arm down a bit. So that's all we have so far. Again, the anticipation pose is really just, it's for the audience to anticipate the action that's about to occur. It's like setting up the action. Okay, so this is our anticipation pose, and we're going to go forward down the timeline again. Let's set a key. We're just blocking in this in rough, and let's point. The overshoot is going to be one of our key poses. So we're going to go forward again down the timeline. And to overshoot this, let's go in a little closer. Okay, so now we have two poses that are exactly the same. The last pose is going to be our rest pose. The second last one is going to be our overshoot. So let's select everything. Free transform tool, pivot to the shoulder, and let's just stretch this whole hand out a little bit. So we're going to stretch it out in X and an equal distance in Y, just to eyeball it. We'll just go to the last pose and you'll see it returns to normal. So when we scrub over this, we can see our rest pose, our anticipation pose, our point. This is the overshoot of the point, so it's going past the pose and then it goes back to it. So if you play that, it's very rough. Okay. So we're going to have to set a few more key poses in here. We just went really rough and put in our main key poses, which define the action, the main action here that's going on. But we're going to go in between pose 1 and 2. F6. So we went 4 frames apart for everything, so we'll go 2 frames in from the first pose. Turn on our onion skinning, and we actually want to put another key pose in here. That's going to drag the arm. Free transform, pivot to the shoulder, and let's do something that's in between here. Take a look at the shoulder, and we want to get like a bit of an arcing motion on this shoulder. It's going to arc as it moves. Don't forget, whenever you have one of these symbols selected, you can use your right, left, up and down arrow keys to move things around slightly like this. Or if you hold shift down and use the arrow keys, it moves it a little faster. Let's set our drag pose right in the center of that. We have a rest pose, drag pose, anticipate, and we're actually going to drag this action as well. So go right in between your third and fourth pose here, F6. Move the upper arm only a little bit, deselect the upper arm, pivot into the elbow, and then we'll move the arm. We'll get that right in between those two poses. And that's dragging pretty well already. As you can see, the hand is going off of our stage, so we don't really want that to happen. This is a staging issue, so we really want that to stay inside. So what I'm going to do to fix that, when we move the entire arm down, originally I'm just going to bring everything down. I'm going to shift arrow key, 1, 2, 3. 3 down and 2 to the right. Do the rest with all these. 3, 1, 2. The hand doesn't go off the top of frame here. We're having the hand drag before it actually goes into its overshoot and then settles. Okay, so we're probably not going to want 4 frames for a settle, but we'll tween this and see how it looks anyways. Okay, let's check that out. Let's shut off our onion skinning and play it. Okay, so the timing looks okay. You'll see that the hand and the forearm are getting all messed up here, and that's happening because Flash animates from point A to point B in a linear fashion. So if you go in between first and second pose, you can see that the forearm it's animating in a straight line to get to the next pose. So we're gonna fix all that later. Let's not worry about that. I know it's hard not to look at it, but right now we're just concentrating on getting our timing locked down before we start refining the animation. So the timing looks pretty good. The only thing I can say that would help this a little bit is at the anticipation pose, we should put a moving hold in. So let's grab all the keys after it, not including the anticipation pose, but go to the next pose after that, and grab all the keys and just just drag them down the timeline, maybe 2 frames. Let's copy our entire anticipation pose, copy frames, go 2 frames down the timeline and select the row and paste frames, and then get rid of that. It always makes that row there that we don't want, your keyframe. So now we have the anticipation pose holding for 2 frames. We don't want it to be completely static, so we're actually going to move it a little bit. So go to the second pose of the hold, zoom in a little so we can see what we're doing, select the whole thing, free transform tool, and we're just going to move it a little bit, pivot to the shoulder. We're going to move it a little bit, and at this point we can even just skew it if you want to. So that's going to give us, it's a moving hold, but really it gives us the impression of deceleration of that action. So in essence, it's really it's an ease in. So if you play it now, that looks much better. So the anticipation pose reads much better. Cool. Okay, so let's go through now and fix all these pieces that are coming apart. One little note on overshooting, usually you overshoot a movement that's quick. So this point is rather quick. That's why I overshot this. If this arm was reaching up to grab, say, a broomstick or latch onto something or hold on to something, I would probably ease into that movement. I wouldn't overshoot that movement. So it's good to know when is an appropriate use of overshoot, and that's basically on quick movements. If it's a fast movement, it's hard to slow down. The movement has momentum, and we overshoot to exaggerate that momentum, and then we settle. Alright, so let's fix the forearm here and the hand. So if we go to the in-between between our first and second pose, let's just zoom in a little bit here. It's basically the forearm and the hand that are the problem. So let's just key our forearm and hand. Just grab those 2 keys, or select those 2 keys and hit F6, and we'll just bring it back to where it's supposed to be. Just go right to the problem area and fix it. So forearm and hand. Actually, the forearm looks okay there, but we'll just key it anyways. Okay, I'm just going to drag here to see what that hand's supposed to be doing. Okay, the hand was dragging, so we're going to put that back to where it was. You could turn on onion skinning at this point to see what it should be doing. Right, so it was dragging. So let's bring it to about here, somewhere in between this pose and the next pose. And onion skinning off because it gets really hairy with tweening on. Between this pose and that pose, see how far apart those 2 drawings are? That'll be really quick, but let's just leave it for now so you can see the outcome. Okay, so here's the hands coming off here. We'll just key those, hand and forearm. Let's put the hand back where it's supposed to go. Key hand and forearm again, fix this problem. Put the hand back where it's supposed to go, and that's our overshoot. Okay, so now if we watch this, it should look pretty good. Okay, so we have our anticipation, we have our drag, our anticipation, easing, and drag again and overshoot and settle. So now let's swap the symbols to get our different hand shapes. When you're swapping symbols, you really want to do it at the fastest part of the motion. As we discussed just a few minutes ago, between this pose and this pose, they're very far apart, these two drawings. I'm just scrubbing back and forth here. So we could switch it here. That'd be a good place to switch it. Or really you can do it right on the anticipation pose. So pick the fastest part of the movement and try to swap your symbol there so it's less noticeable to the viewer. So if we select our hand, actually if you want to double click to go inside the hand symbol, let's double click. Here you'll see 9 frames. Step through all these frames, you'll see there's different hands that are included with this model. We're going to be using the point hand and the fist hand. You can see your frames down here in this area. Frame 1, the next hand's on frame 2. You really want to pay attention to what frame these hands are on inside the symbol. So we're going to be using hand pose number 8 and 9. So it's the last two. So remember 8 and 9. Let's double click anywhere in this white area to get back out, or you can go back to shot comp. So we decided that we're going to switch the hand here. So to do that, you select the symbol, you go to the properties area under looping with the symbol selected, and just under where it says first, you can see it says number 2. That means we're on hand number 2 inside the symbol. So we want to switch it to hand number, I think it was 8 for the fist. No, that's the point. Number 9. So switch that number to 9. And as soon as we do that, as soon as we switch it to 9, it's going to automatically stay keyed like that. So if you scrub over, you'll see it switches on the anticipation pose to the fist. And it doesn't look like the hand's really on there properly, so we can just move that. That change will stay as well. So let's keep that on the fist on the next frame, or the next key frame. So 9. I'll have to move it back a little bit as well. I still want that to stay on the fist, so go back to the next hand key, switch it to 9, and again you may have to move it a bit, so I use my arrow keys. You know what, let's keep it on the fist here as well, and then we'll open the hand up on the next frame. 9, readjust, let's do this rough for now, and then let's have it open on this frame, so it's just going to go back to 2 as we had it originally. And for the point, obviously we want to go to the point hand, and that's number 9. So go back to your properties, make sure you're on the actual frame that you want it to change on, and always select the hand or whatever symbol you're changing, you're swapping out, and press 9. Sorry, 8. 8 was the point. There it is. And you can see it needs a bit of an adjustment. Tap it up a little bit. And the last frame, we'll switch that to 8. Adjust it. There we go. So now if we watch our animation, it should be complete. I'm going to go to my overshoot pose here and just tilt the hand down a little. And that looks better. In a production you'll often have 30, 40 hands. You'll have tons of hands, because when you're posing with a character you can never have enough hands. And with 9 hands you're really not going to have all the hands that you're going to need for any particular pose that you want. So if this character is going to grab a glass of water or lean up against the wall, you're going to have to draw another hand. And the way you do that is just to go to the next frame, right click, insert blank keyframe, and then you just start drawing out the new hand. And then you can go back and change it over here like we just did. So now if we watch our entire thing, we have an arm swing that cycles, hold, and then a point. So this action, both these actions encompass pretty much every animation principle except for stretch and squash. What we want to do now, let's shrink our timeline back to normal, and let's just cut this off at frame 75. Select all these other frames, extra frames we don't need. Right click and remove frames. Okay, so it goes up to 74. Let's get out of our shop comp, go to scene 1 and do the same thing. Do it on both the shot comp and the camera view layer. Remove frames. So our animation is only going to go up to 75. You don't want to save over this file. Go to Save As and save it as Flash Basic 6 Body Mechanics Animated. So same name as the original file, but just put an underscore animated at the end so we know it's animated. Save that for yourself, and we're going to export a movie. So go to File, Export, Go to export video, and in the export video settings you should have convert video in Adobe Media Coder checked, and stop exporting when last frame is reached. So make sure it looks just like this, and export, and it's going to open up the media encoder. There it is. Alright, so make sure that it's on FLV now. We don't want a flash file. I want to get a QuickTime from you, so change it to QuickTime. This should be okay. It's on HD 720, and then here you can choose where you want this movie to go. Flash Basic 6, and that's where you can just give it the same name as your file if you like. And then when you're ready, you click this green arrow, and it'll render the whole movie out for you. And when you're finished, you should get something like this. And we have our handy frame counter at the bottom too. So this concludes the Flash Basics section of the program. Join me in the next section of the program, Body Mechanics.